Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Guest for today's session is Dr. Saurav Sarmah, sir, who is an assistant professor at Chanakya University, Bangalore, and has also been an assistant professor here at RGNUL. We here at CCLG welcome you, sir. Um, the session today is analyzing the US elections and the intricacies related to the US elections. I would request everybody to switch on their cameras if possible. And as and when if somebody has questions, please raise your hands through the raise your hand option. And we're good to go, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Praneet. Let me share my slides I have made. So the title of the lecture is the 47th Trump in America. So this means that Donald Trump has been elected as the 47th President of the United States of America. And the results came out yesterday. And Trump has been declared a winner, and he has also announced his victory. So to understand this, what is this process by which Donald Trump has become the president of the US, we must look into the foundations of the whole American political system. So if you look at the US Constitution, so US political system is based on the Constitution. And the second article of the US Constitution talks about the presidency, Article 2. So you can see here, Article 2 says, executive power shall be vested in a president of the United States of America. So America follows the model of separation of powers. So there are three branches of government. Article 1 talks about the Congress, which is the legislative branch. Article 2 is about the president, who is the executive branch. And then Article 3 talks about the Supreme Court of US, which is the judicial branch. So the president of US is an elected office. Yeah. So the term of the president is for 4 years. And along with the president, the vice president is also elected. So it's the same election that elects both the president and the vice president of the US. And interestingly, in US, we don't have an election commission. So as you can see here in the second clause, that legislature of each state decides the process of election. Okay, and a number of electors is given to the state. So US has an indirect method of electing the president. So it's not based on popular vote. So the states elect electors, and those electors in turn elect the president. Okay, so each state has been allotted a certain number of electors, which is equal to the number of senators and number of representatives in the House of Representatives. In US Congress, which is the legislative body of US, there are two houses. The Senate, which is the upper house, which has equal members for each state. So each state has 2 senators. And it has the lower house, which is House of Representatives, which is based on the population. So larger the population, more number of seats the state has. So for electing the electors or the presidential electors, you have to combine the number of senators and the representatives from each state. Say, for example, if a state has only 1 member in House of Representatives and 2 senators, then it will have 3 electors. Or if a state is very large, for example, California, which is the largest state, has 52 representatives. So 52 plus 2 senators. So they will have 54 electors. Okay, so in this way, this is called the electoral college. So the electoral college system takes into account both population as well as some sort of state representation also. So it's a combination of both the principles, population principle as well as state equality principle. It's a combination of both. Okay, and there are some conditions, of course, like a person already holding an office of profit or a senator or a representative cannot be an elector. Elector has to be someone outside the people who already hold some office in the US government. Then there was a clause 3, which in details discuss the process by which the election is done, but this was amended in 1804. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why it was amended. Before that, let's just look at the remaining clauses. Okay, the fifth one is important, that the US president has to be a natural born citizen, a person who has acquired the citizenship of US through naturalization process cannot stand for presidency. You have to be citizen of US from birth. Or, of course, you are a citizen when the constitution was adopted. That means if you are born before 1789 and you acquired US citizenship, you could, but no one is alive from that time, so that does not apply anymore. And of course, there is the age of 35 years and has to be a resident of US for 14 years. Now, it is interesting that our constitution also has the minimum age for president as 35 years. So that is directly borrowed from the American Constitution. So you must understand by this how important the post of president in US is, that they have put so many conditions on who can become the president. Now, before the 1804 amendment, the US held 4 elections. 4 elections of presidency were held before the 1804 elections. Now, in these elections, there wasn't a separate ballot for president and vice president. So number of candidates stood for election. Any number of candidates could stand. And the person who got the highest number of votes would become the president, and one who got the second highest number of votes would become the vice president. That was the thing. You can see this is the first election, first presidential election, 1788, 89. And each state followed a different process. You can see Connecticut, Georgia, New Jersey, New York, South Carolina. Their electors were appointed by the state legislature. Massachusetts had 2 electors appointed by the state legislature, and the remaining elector was chosen from 2 most popular candidates. So this is a very complex process. And some of the states by then had not even ratified the constitution. Okay, so they never participated in the first election. Okay, and some states divided their state into electoral districts. And from each district, one elector was elected, okay, like Virginia and Delaware. So it was a very complex process. And in the end, we had George Washington, who won all the, so he got 100% support, and he became the president of US. The main contest was for the post of vice president. So John Adams, he emerged as the vice president. Again, in the next election, the second election, same thing happened. George Washington won again 100% votes. And John Adams, he was number 2, and so he became the vice president. Now, by this time, what happened was, the founding fathers initially envisaged that there won't be any political parties. They thought good people will stand for election, and whoever is number 1 would become president, number 2 would become vice president, and it will all go on in good faith. But by the time George Washington's presidency came to an end, 2 parties had already emerged in US. One was the Federalist Party, and the other was the Republican Party. So the Republican Party was led by Thomas Jefferson. These days, historians refer to it as Democratic Republican Party to differentiate it from the current Republican Party. So 2-party system, Federalist and the Democratic Republicans. And John Adams, who was the vice president of George Washington, he won the 1796 elections and became the president. So he got more electoral college votes than Thomas Jefferson. And so Thomas Jefferson, although he belonged to a different party, he had complete disagreement with John Adams. Still, he became the vice president because that was the system. Now, in the next election, the situation was reversed. In 1800, this time, Thomas Jefferson got more votes than John Adams, and so Thomas Jefferson became the president. But John Adams was not the person who got the second highest vote. The second, in fact, Thomas Jefferson got 73. His vice presidential running mate, Aaron Burr, also got 73. Okay, because the person who voted for Thomas Jefferson also voted for Aaron Burr. So both had 73 each. As a result, there was a constitutional crisis. Okay, because if you look at, in fact, I have removed that particular clause from the slide. But in case there was a tie, then the matter would go to the US House of Representatives. So House of Representatives would then vote from the top three candidates and decide on who would be the president. Now, but the representatives voted as a state. They did not vote based on person. It was based on state. So suppose today, those days, California wasn't a part of US, but say California, which has 52 representatives. So there won't be 52 votes for California, but only one vote. Okay, so based on how many votes, how many states you can win, you could become the president. So it took several rounds. I think it was 32 rounds of voting in the House of Representatives. And after that, Thomas Jefferson emerged as number one and Aaron Burr became his vice president. Okay, so because of this constitutional crisis, an amendment was brought which changed the process of electing the president. So that is the 12th Amendment, 1804. So this provision ensured that there will be different ballots for president and vice president. So there will be different boxes. So you vote for a different person as president and a different person as vice president. Okay, so this amendment introduced that. Rest of the things were more or less the same. The president, in case there is a tie, then the president had to be chosen from the top three candidates by the House of Representatives, voting as states and not as individual members. And for that, a quorum of 2/3 of the states and majority of all states was necessary. Okay, again, this reminds me of the Indian Constitution, the constitutional amendment that for in case of the special majority required. So it has to be 2/3 of those present and voting and majority of the entire membership. Okay, it seems similar to me. In case there's a tie for the post of vice president, in that case, the Senate selects who would be the president. So top two candidates would be taken and the senators would vote for them. Again, it's 2/3 of the senators present and voting and majority of the whole number was required to become the vice president. And in case of America, unlike in India, where say vice president, if president dies or resigns, the vice president is an acting president. But in US, the vice president becomes a full-time president and completes the remainder of the term of the president. So vice president is very important in that sense. In another sense, vice president is less important, that till the president is in office, what is the role of the vice president? So after a lot of discussion, they decided to give him the job of presiding over the Senate. Just like in India, the vice president presides over the Rajya Sabha. So in any case, I have cut this particular line here because this was also amended later on. Okay, so this has been amended. This is basically when the presidency would be inaugurated. So they have a fixed date. Unlike, say, in India, where election can be held anytime in the year, And once the election results come out and then a government is formed, the tenure of the government begins. In US, there's a fixed date. So earlier it was the 4th of March after the elections. So say if election are held now, so next year, 4th of March, it would start. But this has been amended, and now it's the 28th of January at noon. The president takes the oath and he becomes the elected president-elect takes the oath and becomes the president. Okay. So after this amendment, things became clearer. And this was a time of domination of one party. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson's party, the Democratic Republican Party, kept on sweeping the elections after that. Thomas Jefferson became president. After that, James Madison, the person who had drafted the US Constitution, he became the president, again 2 terms. And then after him, James Monroe, he became the president. He's famous for the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, when he was the Secretary of State under James Madison, 1815, he gave the famous Monroe Doctrine, which said that no foreign power had the right to interfere in the American continents. Okay, so this was a period of domination of one party. But as a result, what happened was in the 1824 elections, the same party, Democratic Republicans, had 4 candidates because there's no other party. And because of that, the party discipline loosened, and there were 4 different candidates who stood for elections. And none of them could get majority because the votes were divided. As a result, none of them got the majority. And what happens if there's no majority? It goes to the House of Representatives. And in the House of Representatives, John Quincy Adams, who was the son of John Adams, he was elected as the president. Although if you look at the electoral vote and the popular vote, Andrew Jackson, he has 40% popular vote and 99 electoral votes, which is much more than John Quincy Adams, 32.7% popular vote and 84 electoral votes. Because of this, Andrew Jackson created the Democratic Party. Democratic Party, which is the Democratic Party of today. So it was started in 1828, just before the next presidential elections. And it was a populist party. Andrew Jackson was a populist. Okay, he believed in expanding the electorate, so taking power from the elite and giving it to the ordinary people. Of course, the ordinary people would be white male mostly. And he was also a very aggressive president. He wanted to expand American territory. So he fought against the native tribes in several wars. He was a war hero and participated in the expansion of American territory. Okay, so he was a very aggressive populist type of a president. And after Democratic Party was created, it became the dominant party. Okay, you can see in 1828, it sweeps the election here. You can see the map. 178 electoral votes and only 83 for John Quincy Adams. So both father and son, John Adams as well as John Quincy Adams, after serving 1 term, are defeated by their opponents, who were the losers of the previous election. Okay, you can see this here also. John Adams had defeated Thomas Jefferson, and in the next election, Thomas Jefferson defeats John Adams. And here you can see John Quincy Adams defeats Andrew Jackson, and then Andrew Jackson defeats John Quincy Adams. So this is the origin of the Democratic Party. It was considered to be a pro-slavery party. Okay, it was a supporter of the right of the white men. Then there are certain people in the northern part of America who were not happy with slavery. They became opponents of slavery, and they formed a new party called the Republican Party. This was formed in 1854. It did not do very well in 1856 elections, but in the 1860 elections, the Republicans emerged as winners. Okay, although they won because there was a split within the Democratic Party. The Southern Democrats, who were very strongly pro-slavery, they they introduced their own candidate. And the Northern Democrats, they had their own candidate. And because of this split, the vote split between the Democratic candidates, Abraham Lincoln, getting only 39.7% of the votes, could become victorious. Okay, in terms of electoral college, he won the majority. Although in popular vote, he could not get the majority. So this is the origin of the Republican Party. The Republican Party started out as an anti-slavery party. Okay, and then of course there was a whole civil war, and slavery was abolished by Abraham Lincoln. So for a few elections, the southern states did not have the full rights to vote. So American army occupied the southern states and they started reconstruction. So that is known as the Reconstruction era. So in this Reconstruction era, the blacks were given, the former slaves, they were given the right to vote. And those people who opposed abolition of slavery, they were denied the right to vote. They were arrested, they were persecuted. Okay, because Abraham Lincoln wanted to transform the southern state, reunite them completely with the rest of the country. And this continued under Ulysses S. Grant, who was the general of the northern armies in the Civil War. And he also won very, very easily the elections. And you can see the southern states are gradually getting integrated. This process continued until 1876 elections. This was a very close elections. You can say now gradually the southern states have started voting for the Democratic Party. And they put a lot of pressure. They were not allowing Rutherford Hayes to become the president. They were creating problems because remember the election results has to be announced by the states. So and many of these states were controlled by Southern Democrats. And so they were refusing to notify the results of the election. And without that notification, the president cannot be elected. And so they were creating problems in the way of electing a Republican president. So in 1877, there was a compromise. It is called the Compromise of 1877, after which the American army withdrew from the South. Okay, southern states were now free to choose their own path. And they chose the path of segregation. So they adopted what are known as Jim Crow laws. Most of the black citizens were deprived of the right to vote. Strict segregation was introduced, by which the facilities and social institutions could not be used commonly. So a white person and a black person could not use the same facilities or the same institutions. Separate institutions like schools, colleges, hospitals, even toilets were created for blacks and whites. In a bus, certain number of seats would be allotted to the blacks so that both the races could not intermingle. A marriage was forbidden. Marriage between a white and a black person was forbidden. So in this way, segregation was introduced in the south of US. And this was led by the white Democrats. And you can see this is the year 1880 election. American map is now divided. You can see the southern states. These are the southern states. I hope you can see the slide clearly. In case I can even enlarge this. Yeah, you can see
It's visible, sir.
Okay, it is visible. Okay. So these southern states have became a solid voting bloc for the Democratic Party. Okay, most of these states were those which had supported slavery, and now they were supporters of segregation, and they voted for the Democratic Party. Where the northern part, which was more industrialized, okay, this is known as the Rust Belt. This is where all the coal and steel industries came up in US, textiles and so on, while South was mostly agricultural. Okay, and so this divide was created. So Democratic Party candidates will get votes from the South and the Republicans would get vote from the North. And you can see America is also gradually expanding. Okay, so these territories were acquired from Mexico, and the more expansion remaining. So this is the year. This is the year 1880. Now there's a very interesting case of Grover Cleveland. So this is similar to what happened to Donald Trump. So in the year, so Grover Cleveland, he belonged to the Democratic Party. In the year 1884, he was elected as the president. You can see the entire South voted for him. But in the next election, in 1888, he was defeated. As a sitting president, he was defeated by the Republican Party. Okay, you can see by this time, the election is very close. It's now divided, the country is divided into two. It's just a matter of few states. So these states came to be known as the swing states. Okay, so there were certain Republican states which will always vote for the Republican Party. There would be some states, like the southern states in this case, which would always vote for the Democratic Party. In between, there were 2 or 3 swing states which could go either way. So the focus of the election campaign used to be, or even is today, the swing states. And whichever party wins the swing states gets the presidency. So that is the idea. So Cleveland lost in 1888, but he came back again after 4 years. 1892, he won the presidential election. So he became the president for the second time. Okay, here you can see there's a third party candidate also, the Populist Party. The green areas in the map won by the Populist Party. Okay, now at that time in the US Constitution, there was no term limit for the president. There was no limitation that a president could stand only for election twice. There was no such, I mean, a person could serve only 2 terms. There was no such restriction. George Washington, the first president of US, in fact, was requested to serve for a 3rd term, but he refused. He simply ended his 2nd term and he left home. Okay, and so that became a precedence. Every president was supposed to serve 2 terms and then not continue for the 3rd term. Okay, there was no rule, no law like that, but it was a precedent set by the most respected first president of US, George Washington, and therefore it was followed by all the succeeding president except one, which we'll see. Okay, so by this time you can see you have the Republican Party, which mostly won the North, and the Democratic Party, which mostly won the southern states. So when we enter the 20th century, this trend continues. Now, America has been mostly a 2-party system, but in some elections there have been 3rd-party candidates. One of the most famous ones was 1912, when the former Republican president of US, Theodore Roosevelt, he formed his own party called the Progressive, and he was standing for the 3rd term. Okay, he was standing for 3rd term. He did not get the nomination of the Republican Party, and William Taft was the Republican candidate. But he was very popular. Roosevelt was a very popular president. He was Teddy Roosevelt. He was called Teddy Roosevelt. The teddy bear that children play is named after him. And he contested as a 3rd-party candidate. And he did better than the Republican Party. He got more electoral votes and also popular vote than the Republican candidate William Taft. But because the Republican Party vote split, Woodrow Wilson, the candidate of the Democratic Party, became the president. Okay, so this trend of a 3rd party called the Progressive Party continued, but eventually, again, the 2-party system was restored. You can see this is 1924 election. Calvin Coolidge, who is one of the favorite Republican presidents. The Republicans love him very much. So he became the president in 1924. And you can see the trend is same. South is solidly Democrat and the North is Republican. Of course, then we have the Great Depression, and because of which Franklin Roosevelt, because Great Depression came under the Republican government. So Herbert Hoover was the president during the Great Depression, during the beginning of Great Depression. As a result, people were angry, and so they voted for Franklin Roosevelt, who was a relative of Theodore Roosevelt. He basically swept that election, 1932 elections. You can see almost the whole country is blue here. And now he was very popular, and this was a time of the Great Depression, followed by the Second World War. So the country was in a crisis. And because of that, he continued to serve as the president for 4 terms. Okay, he served the 2 terms, and they contested for the 3rd term. And then during the Second World War, he also contested for the 4th term. But he died within 1 year of winning the 4th election. Okay, and so he was the only president of US who served more than 2 terms. And this was the period when Democratic Party was the dominant party. And he introduced certain policies known as the New Deal, which was basically social programs, helping the poor, government investments, so on and so forth. Yeah, this was Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, after this, after Roosevelt, the constitution was amended to prevent anyone else from becoming president again for 3 terms. And so, from 1948 onwards, it is not possible for a person to serve as US president for 3 terms. So 2 terms is the term limit. This was introduced only after the death of Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, so by now by law, the 2-term limit is implemented. Okay, then there was this 20th Amendment, which changed the inauguration day. So nowadays the inauguration day is 20th January. Okay, so in case Donald Trump takes the oath on of president, it will be 20th January 2025 at noon. I mean, noon in US, Washington, D.C. Okay, so we continued. So there are some other interesting stories regarding the US presidential elections. For example, the 1960 election. Okay, and this is about Richard Nixon, who was the vice president of US. He contested against John F. Kennedy, and this was a very tight election in terms of popular vote. You can see 49-49. But eventually, John F. Kennedy became the winner. Okay, again, you can see southern states are mostly with the Democratic Party. Then, of course, there's this Kennedy assassination, and his vice president, Lyndon Johnson, he becomes the president. And because there's a sympathy wave, therefore, the Democratic Party sweeps the 1964 elections. But you'll see an interesting trend here. The southern states, some of the southern states, did not vote for the Democratic Party. They voted for the Republican Party because the Republican candidate was a hardcore conservative, and he started talking about state rights. Okay, so this was not a trend within the Republican Party, but only this particular candidate, because in this election there was a huge sympathy wave. So to counter the sympathy wave, Republican Party decided to nominate a candidate who will be a unique candidate. Okay, so the plan was to transform the southern votes from being pro-Democrat to pro-Republican, and it succeeded in this particular election. Although overall, Johnson or the Democratic Party won this election. Now the comeback story. Next year, 1968, Lyndon Johnson refused to stand for elections, and Richard Nixon came back as the Republican candidate, and he became the president. So he lost in 1960, returned in 1968 to become the American president. Here you can see again there's a split. The Southern Democrats, okay, they form their own independent party under George Wallace, and they contest as a third party. But of course, they don't win. It is the Republican Party that emerges as victorious. And next election, Richard Nixon sweeps the whole country. The entire country is now voting for Richard Nixon. Similar thing happened with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan also in 1984, he won all the states except the home state of the opponent, Minnesota and Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. always votes for the Democratic Party. They have 3 electors, so that always goes to the Democratic Party. And then there's some other prominent elections, 1992 election, in which there were again 3 candidates. And Rose Perot was an independent candidate. He was a businessman. He got 18.9% votes. As a result, he split the Republican votes. And because of which, Bill Clinton won. In fact, Bill Clinton won the next election also because Rose Perot again stood and again cut a substantial amount of Republican votes. Okay, he was a Southern Texan businessman. And so Bill Clinton won the election twice, but he never got a majority of popular vote, always got below 50%. And he won because of a third party candidate. Now, a very close election was the election of the year 2000. In this year, George W. Bush defeated the vice president of that year, Al Gore. And it was a very close election. You can see the electoral votes. In fact, George W. Bush got less popular vote than Al Gore. And in terms of electoral vote also, because of the state of Florida, because the election there was contested and the matter eventually went to the Supreme Court of United States, which was predominantly Republican appointed, and it basically gave a verdict in favor of George W. Bush, and he became the president. And Al Gore, who was the vice president, as the presiding officer, was supposed to count the votes, because the electors, they vote in their own states for the candidate, and all the ballots are then carried to Washington, D.C. And the vice president then counts the vote in front of all the senators and the representatives. Okay, so Al Gore, and this is the same thing that will apply now to Kamala Harris. So in December, when the electoral college votes are counted, it is Kamala Harris who would have to count the votes and then declare Donald Trump as the winner. Same thing happened with Al Gore in the year 2000. Okay, and then another big election was 2008 elections when the Democratic Party came back under Barack Obama. And you can see again the southern states are, except for Florida, the southern states voted for the Republican Party. So the situation is now reversed. The South is solidly Republican, and the North, especially the East Coast and the West Coast, is solidly Democratic. Okay, this trend can be seen from the 90s. California, New York, they always vote for the Democratic Party candidate. And the southern states vote for the Republican Party. Okay, so the trend is reversed. Earlier, South was solidly Democratic. Now South is solidly Republican. That is because Republican Party under Ronald Reagan focused basically on Christianity and evangelical Christianity to get votes. So Republican Party has become a party of evangelical Christians, and evangelical Christianity is most popular in the southern states of United States of America. Okay, so they are solidly Republican. Florida is an exception because there are a lot of immigrants in Florida from Cuba, and many Latinos are there. Okay, so they had a trend in between that they voted for the Democratic Party. Okay, now let's come to the big three: 2016, 2020, and 2024. Now, why did Donald Trump win in 2016? Now, if you look at the 2012 election, these are the blue states are the ones won by Barack Obama, and the red states were won by the Republican Mitt Romney. And in the 2016 elections, you can see Donald Trump has flipped some of these states. Some of these states have been flipped. Which are these states? You can see Florida. So Florida had been voting for many elections for the Democratic Party. Here, you can see Florida has flipped. Because Donald Trump is very popular in Florida, and most immigrants in Florida are from Cuba. And Cuban Americans are very anti-left because of course, Fidel Castro, who is to rule over Cuba, he established a communist dictatorship there. And so those escaping from a communist dictatorship didn't like left-wing policies. Uh, Before Barack Obama, Democratic Party was not very left. Okay, it was a centrist party. But in the second term of Barack Obama, the party gradually turned towards the left. It became more of a culturally left party. Economically, you cannot call it left, but culturally, it became more left wing. As a result, these Cuban Americans, who are also very devout Catholics, and because Donald Trump is personally popular in Florida, this state basically flipped. Another set of states that flipped are the Rust Belt states. These are the states which were the center of American industry. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and this one was is it Minnesota? No, Wisconsin. Sorry, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. This is the Rust Belt. This is where most of the industrial workers are located. Now, during the tenure of Barack Obama, Democratic Party adopted a lot of pro-environment policies, and they began to close down many of the industries and coal mines in America. As a result, many white working class men became unemployed, or they were not paid as well as they were paid before. So this industrial worker job was not paying as well as it was paying before. Okay, and so these states where there are large number of white working class, they voted for Donald Trump because Donald Trump talked about creating jobs, digging out the oil wealth and mineral wealth of America to ensure prosperity, bring all the industries back, stop immigration so that the foreigners cannot take away the jobs and so on. So these ideas became very popular. So as a result, he is able to flip. You can see in 2016, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And he also flips, you can see Ohio also. Okay, this is also part of the Rust Belt. Okay, so all these states are flipped. He also, no, so these are already solidly, any other state? I already told you about Florida and Rust Belt. So this was enough. The flipping of these swing states was enough to ensure that Donald Trump emerged victorious. But he did not get more popular votes than Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton got 2% popular votes more than Donald Trump. That is because the major population centers of US today are California and the East Coast and the West Coast. California and places like Massachusetts and New York. These are the places where the most population is concentrated. Although if you look at the map, it seems that most of America is Republican, but these are all rural areas. Okay, the vast open land, population is very sparse. Okay, therefore, although most of the states are carried by Republicans in terms of population, it's almost 50-50 and mostly favoring the Democratic Party. So Trump was doing well. He ensured a substantial GDP growth. I think at one stage, the growth reached even 4%, up to almost nearly 4%, which is a big deal for such a huge economy as US. Developed countries don't grow at 4%. They grow either at 1 or 2%. Okay, but because of his policies of bringing back jobs home, imposing tariffs on foreign imports and so on, he was able to ensure, and also tax cuts ensured that American economy could grow. But then came COVID, and because of COVID, economy again shrunk, and he did not handle that crisis properly because he was not expecting anything like that. And so in the 2020 elections, you can see the states again flipped. Florida remained, but Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, they went to Joe Biden. Okay, and Joe Biden was also able to flip this Arizona, even Georgia. Georgia is part of the Deep South, very solidly Republican for many years, but he was able to flip it because of the suffering of the people during COVID, and uh, the behavior of Trump was sometimes unpredictable, and so many people got very upset with Donald Trump. And of course, also there was this whole issue raised by Trump about voter fraud and so on, which has not been proved. But then, because of that, on the when the voting was done for the president, after that, when president was supposed to be inaugurated, before that, so 20th January is the date when there is a presidential inauguration. On 6th on the 6th of January in 2021, the supporters of Trump, then they stormed into the US Congress, and that became a big scene. Although only I think one person died in that, but it became a big spectacle in the media. And so, people got alienated from Trump, including his own vice president, Mike Pence, who was the presiding officer for counting of the votes. And he refused to turn the election in favor of Trump. He said, no, I'll follow the Constitution. And so as a result, Trump got a lot of negative press. He became very unpopular. And so Joe Biden was inaugurated as the president. Now, under Joe Biden, the 4 years of Joe Biden have been a period when nothing has happened. Basically, America is not doing anything at all. In terms, I mean, I'm talking about, because he had promised introduction of healthcare and all those things, but nothing really. Even the borders, there are problems there. Internationally, we see big crisis emerging: Ukraine and Gaza war, and the Democratic Party seems very unsure about what positions to take. So they take the pro-establishment position. They support Ukraine against Russia. They support Israel against Palestine. So, but the left, which is the primary vote bank of the Democratic Party, opposes Israel particularly. In case of Russia, they have a common understanding, so they dislike Russia. But in case of Israel, there's an issue. And the withdrawal from Afghanistan was also very problematic. And so on. So there are many such issues, and the president was very senile. He in front of the media, he forgot things. He sometimes stood clueless what to say, what not to say. All these things created an image of a very weak government and a very weak president. And so, in the 2024 elections, during that time when there was a debate between Biden and Trump, Biden's senility was basically exposed. He was not able to debate properly. For long periods, he stood completely clueless. So the Democratic Party forced him out and nominated his vice president, Kamala Harris, as the presidential candidate. So in the end, the 2024 election was between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. There are many Republican hopefuls also against Trump, like Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley. But Trump right now is the most popular person within the Republican Party, and by a huge margin. 60-70% of the Republican Party supports him. So he did not even participate in the debates of the Republican Party because he was overwhelmingly the leader. And all other candidates fell by the way, and Trump became the Republican nominee. So these were the two candidates. So yeah, day before yesterday, if you look at the Indian time, the voting began, and yesterday night we started getting the results. And just before start of this lecture, I clicked this picture from the Google search, and you can see Donald Trump has won the majority of the Electoral College, 295. And these two states, Arizona and Nevada, also is winning, it seems, but they have not yet been declared. So 11 plus 16, 17. So add 17 to 295, it would become 312. So basically, Trump is slated to win with 312 electoral votes. And if you look at the popular votes also, this time, Trump has also won the popular vote. Although this number is decreasing gradually, but I think in the end, he will have more than 50% votes. And Kamala Harris will be about 2.5% less than Trump, or even 3%. Okay, so both in terms of popular vote as well as the Electoral College, Trump has a majority this time. Now, the reasons why Trump won and Kamala Harris lost. So Kamala Harris has been one of the most unpopular vice president in US history. Consistently, throughout these 4 years, uh, she has been polled among the people, and people have not given a very high approval to her. In fact, one task that was given to her, that was the regulation of the southern border, she failed miserably in that. And she doesn't seem to be a very genuine candidate. Okay, so on many of these issues, she does not have any position. She is a very pro-establishment person, and uh, and she doesn't have any principal position. Okay, whatever the establishment wants, she accepts. And therefore, the voters are not able to really trust her. And they actually don't know what she thinks, and what her policies will be in future. So except saying that Trump, the boogeyman, I want to stop him, except that there is no message there was no message in the campaign of the Democratic Party. Only message was that Trump is an evil person. Okay, if he's going to come, he's going to take away the rights of women, because by appointing the Supreme Court judges, he has flipped the Supreme Court to a Republican majority, and Republican conservative majority, not a Republican centrist majority, but a clear conservative majority. And because of that, Roe versus Wade judgment was reversed. And so that it has some implications on abortion. And so the whole idea was, if Trump comes back, then abortion will be banned in US. Okay, so this is an infringement upon the rights of women. Similarly, he's a racist. So Latinos, blacks, Muslim Americans, Asian Americans, everyone is going to suffer because of the rise of white racism. So this is another thing. So in this way, then plus Trump would be pro-rich and he would cut the taxes. As a result, the poor will suffer more. So these are some of the issues. They're mostly negative. Kamala Harris's campaign was mostly negative. On the other hand, Trump uh, fought this election on the issue of uh, the same issues that he had raised in 2016, that he wants to make America great again, stop immigration, bring back the jobs, dig the oil, and ensure the industries come back and America becomes energy, not only self-sufficient, but net energy exporter, stop wars, not intervene in foreign countries. So these are some of the issues that increase the popularity of Trump among many people, including people who generally lean towards the West. because they're anti-war, and so Trump's message is generally anti-war and pro-business. And so, although they are uneasy about the pro-rich leanings of Trump, but his anti-war positions are very attractive to these people. So, yeah, and Trump had support of some prominent people like Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, and so on, and so who are very popular in America, and so that also, and who are not considered to be conservatives. And so this time, although I was surprised, I never thought that the establishment would allow such a radical candidate as Trump to win. In fact, in 2016, the first term of Trump was kept in check by the establishment. But this time, I would think it will be very interesting to see whether Trump will be as cautious as he was in his first term, or he would take some very radical decisions in terms of the border and energy resources, so on and so forth. Let's see what happens. So I'll stop here. I hope I was able to give you a comprehensive picture of the American electoral system as it pertains to the American presidency. So we discussed the whole range of elections, beginning with the first 1788, 89 elections of George Washington, and we ended with the 2024 elections of Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very insightful session. I'll open the floor with questions. Um, so my question here is, sir, you've explained all the elections running from starting from the first election or down to the 2024 elections. We've seen the states swinging of southern states swinging, and the East Coast, West Coast swinging from Republicans to Democrats. The one thing what I wanted to I have actually two questions, but the first question is, where do geopolitical events rather than domestic events in the US, like you said that how Kamala Harris did not have a lot of her stand was not clear on a lot of domestic issues, and which is what cost her the elections. And uh, do American elections get more influenced by what is happening worldwide geopolitical events, or is it more of based on the domestic problems in America? And I'm asking this in the context of the Vietnam War, the Iraq War, and now the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah, so in America, people are mostly inward looking. They are not looking at the world in terms of when they want to elect a government. And so the impact internationally we have seen is mostly pro-intervention in recent times I'm talking about. So they have voted for presidents who have supported the Vietnam War, whether it was Lyndon Johnson who started that intervention process, or Richard Nixon who continued it. Eventually, in his second term, he eventually withdrew, but withdrew defeated. Similarly, after the Iraq War, George W. Bush got a overwhelming support. In this first election, he did not get popular majority, but in the 2004 elections after the Iraq War, after Afghanistan and then Iraq, he got absolute majority of the popular vote also. So Americans have, towards the world, they don't really think too much about the world. And whenever like America goes out, they want to see success, victory, machoism, and so that creates a very positive image. In recent times, there has been a bit of wariness about the foreign interventions because they haven't been very successful. So this lack of success is creating a feeling in America that this is a waste of money when within America the living conditions are declining. There's a lack of infrastructure and so on. At that time, why is the US spending so much money in foreign wars? So there is a certain among certain sections there is an anti-war sentiment. So there's some people who oppose the support to Ukraine. They say, why is US trying to expand NATO and trying to instigate Russia? Similarly, in case of among the right wing also, there are some people For example, Candace Owens and the former Fox News commentator, what is his name? Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson. So they are very anti-Gaza war. They say, okay, uh, America, so Israel is fighting against the Palestinians. Why should America support Israel? Let them sort out their own issue. Why should America spend money to support foreign countries? So yeah, so in this way, there is some influence, but generally, you see, if you look at the map, most of Americans have already decided. Some are Republican
Right.
voters, some are Democratic. It is just in the swing states that these issues have some influence. Yeah.
Sir,
Yes.
so my question is, what can you say about the voting preference of Indian origin voters in America this in this election? Your
Yeah. So
thoughts?
yes. Yeah. That's a very good question. Uh, Indian Americans have traditionally voted for the Democratic Party because Democratic Party has been a pro-immigrant party. It is pro-minorities in its policies. So 70% of Indian Americans vote for the Democratic Party. Uh, what has happened in the recent years is that although Donald Trump is anti-immigration and he wants to tighten the H-1B visa also, which would affect mostly Indians, uh, but they feel that the left is turning a lot anti-Hindu in its orientation. And you can see uh, in the vicinity of Trump, a couple of Hindu Americans. One is Tulsi Gabbard, and the other is Vivek Ramaswamy, who have played a very prominent role in the campaign. And even in the previous 2016 election, there was this Hindu organization supporting Trump, and Trump even made a video. I don't know if I can show you that video, very interesting, where he even speaks in Hindi there. Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar, something like that. So, and you see, when he was elected, President Modi also had joined rallies with him. Howdy Modi in Texas, and then Namaste Trump in it was in Ahmedabad, I think. Uh, uh, Motera Stadium, where is it? Is it in Ahmedabad?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
That was
yes.
when Trump came to India
Yeah.
and was
So
hosted.
as a result, Trump has become very popular among certain sections of Indian Americans, and also the wife of the his vice president presidential running mate, J.D. Vance's wife, is Usha Vance. She is also a Hindu. And unlike the trend before, earlier the Republican candidates, because Republican Party is a very pro-Christian party, and so many of these Indian Americans they converted to Christianity if they had to contest. For example, Nikki Haley was, I think, originally a Sikh, and she converted to Christianity. And then even Kamala Harris, she's a nominally, I think, a Christian. And also there was this another guy, Bobby Jindal. He was a governor. So they had to convert to Christianity in order to win elections. But now it seems that this trend is changing. So this has an influence on the thinking of the Indian Americans. And I won't be surprised if more than 50% of the Indian Americans this time have voted for Trump.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Uh, Sir, uh, hello, sir. Long time no see.
Yes,
uh,
yes, yes. I remember your name. Ah,
yeah, sir. I was tracking the demographics of the particular of the vote, popular vote. So I looked at that Trump basically overperformed in all of the key ethnic groups, including women. He got almost
mm,
50% vote in women, although
mm,
abortion was a major issue on the ticket. So,
yes.
and the only particular group that he underperformed in was single unmarried women, which was very
Mm.
unusual. So I wanted to know basically what is the socio-political case for even after all that was laid down to the electorate, why exactly all of the ethnic groups in US, including which are basically not part of the US, which are not white, like Latino, blacks, even for some example, even Somalians also voted for them. and even Arab Americans also voted. So what was the socio-political case which basically drove all the key constituencies towards Trump? I
Right.
wanted to know particularly that.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. Uh, First thing you must understand is Trump starts with a very low base. So generally, these people don't vote for Republican Party, and because so the trend shows that what is the increase. So because the base number is low, so even if there is a certain, even if it's a small, tiny kind of an increase in terms of percentage, it becomes much higher. Okay, so in case of say Arab Americans or other minorities, that could be the case that because the base figure is low, so there is this any type of increase shows large numbers. Okay, if say 1,000 people are voting, if 2,000 people vote, that means it's a 100% increase. Okay, so if 2 lakh people are voting and then 1,000 increase, the percentage is much lower. So the base figure is very important. Now, in case of women, you see, unlike the Hollywood movies and what they show, or the popular media, what we see, large number of women in US are very conservative. Many are very devout Christians. Okay, and many are anti-abortion, and therefore they're not like in agreement with the feminist, and many of them support a ban on abortion. So that is also an thing. That is also a thing that you must consider, including people from minorities. Many of the Latinos are very devout Catholics. So and Catholic Church disapproves of abortion. Similarly, among the blacks, there are a large number of very devout Christians, Protestants among the blacks, and so they are also anti-abortion. So, uh, of course, in the media, in the popular media, mostly the feminists are more prominent, and so that the whole I don't know these statistics. So you are saying that single unmarried women mostly oppose Trump,
So
and
the
so that
source
is
is New York Times, just in case.
yeah. So anyway, so obviously, so what you are saying must be correct. So I myself have not examined that, but mostly the single unmarried women would be a social group which would be mostly feminist, and so they are opposed to restrictions on abortion, and therefore naturally I think they would be opposed to the Republican Party, not just Trump, but in general they would be opposed to the Republican Party. How do you think the coming back of Trump will impact Indo-US policies, especially with regards to Indo-Pacific and China plus one? So the term Indo-Pacific was coined by the Trump administration. Okay, when America came up with the Indo-Pacific strategy. And the interesting news that I was reading yesterday was there are some obstacles in the recent disengagement between India and China. Okay, so India had some problems with the democratic administration in terms of interference in the internal affairs of the country, recent events in Bangladesh, and what is happening with Canada. So there are a lot of disagreements between the current Biden administration and the Indian government. And therefore, I think that it is because of that, because obviously I can't know what the leaders are thinking, but what my analysis is that the Indian government moved closer to China because the trust with the American administration had to come down. Trust level had declined. As a result, India fell a bit unsecure about the China border, so they did not want to antagonize China further, and both sides. And China also is a bit has turned a bit inwards recently after the COVID crisis because it has got a very bad name. And the whole Ukraine war and all those situations have made Chinese very cautious, and therefore both sides were ready to come to negotiations. But yesterday, it seems that there are some obstacles that have emerged in after Trump has won. Some obstacles have emerged in the disengagement plan, and that could be because Trump is very anti-China, and India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I think, feels more comfortable with Trump as president, which the evidence is basically in the first term he was doing all these rallies with Trump, so obviously he prefers Trump. Uh, And so now, in order to please the new coming American administration, the relations with China would again turn cold. Okay, so I see that. So I think the Quad will be re-strengthened under Trump, and the focus will again shift on China. In terms of, say, Ukraine, I think Trump would open a line of communication with Putin. Of course, he has to come to power first. He just won the popular election, but this is not the real election. The real election is once the electors elect and then inauguration. So there are 2 months period. So anything can happen in 2 months. And we have seen a couple of assassination attempts on Trump. So we don't know what happens. So until he's inaugurated, we have to watch things very carefully. But my perception is once he comes, he will open the channels of communication with Vladimir Putin, and some kind of a resolution would be reached on the Ukraine issue. He would be ready to compromise on Ukraine's territory. And in case of Israel also, he would, I think, give Netanyahu a bit of free hand, but I think he would put a kind of a time limit on it. Tell him that get the thing done within a month or something like that so that we can get back to business. And again, on Iran also, he will be tougher, like last time. He had canceled that nuclear deal. So we'll see, going back to the first term policies, and even I think in much more stronger way, because it's a much stronger mandate that he has got. And this is his final term. He cannot run again. And so he does not have to worry about re-election. And so this time it is going to be, I think, much more stronger, much more aggressive. Some guest has asked, under Trump, would US abandon Canada, charging India for Khalistani killings? How will it affect the trio US, Canada, India relation? See, Canada is basically the team B of US. So these what are called the Five Eyes. They just do what the US tells them. They don't have any autonomous foreign policy, whether it's Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. So they follow the American cue. And so if the American administration is under Trump, I don't think they will do any such thing. Nothing like that. Trudeau was a PM under Trump, or when Trump was, I'm saying under Trump, when Trump was president, at that time also Trudeau was the PM. Nothing like that happened. So, and of course, India also has to take a step back. Trump won't tolerate any incidents within US by the Indian government. And so India also has to be careful with him.
I have a minor counter to the foreign policy issue. Sir, I don't think as per having Trump as president will very significantly change US foreign policy, because you see the deep state particularly has their people on both sides of the party, right? So during Bush era, they used to be in the Republican side. Now suddenly they have shifted towards Democrats. They keep their pieces everywhere. So even if and until and unless basically Elon Musk and especially Vivek Ramaswamy, who might be part of his cabinet, they have particularly hinted that they are going to clean up the US bureaucracy. So until unless that happens, they start going after the three-letter agencies and start cleaning them up, I don't think it's going to change much, because he will be still shackled by all these bureaucrats and other deep state people who will not allow him to do business as usual. Because even in Trump era, we should remember that he still interfered, tried to make statements on Kashmir, right? So that also happened. So, and I don't think he giving a statement for Bangladesh was really genuine. I think somebody in his party or campaign told him make a statement on Bangladesh just so we can get some Indian Hindu people on our side. So I think it's more of a platitude and transactional. It's really not what he does not have. Basically, he's not ideologically driven to go with India. I don't think so. It will be more transactional.
Yeah. So I will be a bit surprised if in his second term also Trump continues with pro-establishment policies. Because after all, what has happened to him? Many of these establishment cabinet members that he had turned against him, and his arrest and assassination attempts and all this. So I think he would be a changed person this time. I'd be surprised if he is very pro-establishment. Of course, what you are saying is some of these changes can be made within the bureaucracy. Yeah, so that may be possible. I think so. Something will happen like that on those lines. Of course, not completely because establishment also is required. So because those agencies are very important to run the US government and its policies. So it cannot be completely anti-establishment, but I think more than the first term, he would be much more than the first time he would be anti-establishment this time.
Sir, I think it will be more of a case that he'll come to table with Modi and he'll say, we'll stop all these poking. We make a deal with you. Until Modi makes
Yeah.
a deal with him, I don't think he will
Yeah,
basically
I
change
agree
his
with that, but
policy.
I was not talking in terms of India. I mean, not in terms of US India. I was talking about in general. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, he's transactional. His main thing is give and take. So you'll ask Modi what you will buy from us. That will be the first question, I think. Professor Rao has, I think, raised his hand. He has a question.
So nice. Are you able to hear me, sir?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So my query is something simple. In terms of economics, is IT the main sort of source of income or whatever the biggest economic factor? Is it IT for India, or is there something else like arms and jets and so on? So what is the main transaction which happens between our two countries?
Yeah, so
And
I am, yes, sir,
and
yes.
is Trump going to change the current scenario? I mean, there is speculation about that. Some people say IT should be scared. Others should say IT should welcome Trump. So, what is the sort of? I mean, one would like to be clear from an
Yes,
expert
yes,
like you.
yes, yes. So I'm not an economist, so I have actually not looked into the various the percentages of the various economic engagements between India and US, the various sectors. But we know IT is a very important sector. So Trump is of course open to business. He's a businessman. He likes business. It's not that he will stop business. Only issue is in case of IT is the H-1B visas that Indian IT experts go and live in US and work in American companies. So there could be a tightening of that. But I don't think that really has a substantial impact on India's national income. It has some portion of our income may be coming from Indian professionals working in US. But if you look at the IT sector as a whole, so say companies in Bangalore, the products that they're producing and the American companies buy, Trump's policy won't influence that. It will
Okay.
only influence the immigration, those who want to go and work in US. So they might be affected. Yeah, in terms of arms, Trump is very interested that America buys US weapons. But in India, there is a kind of a trust deficit. Yeah, so India doesn't want to be dependent on the American arms because we have seen that America sometimes uses that as a leverage and arm twist some of its allies and as a result, India's independent foreign policy might be affected. Although to please Trump, some American arms have to be purchased. And that is a good policy because you have to keep him in good humor. Because otherwise, mostly he's a non-interfering person. He won't, like what happened in Bangladesh, I think wouldn't happen under Trump presidency.
Hello, sir. Am I audible to you?
Yes, yes, sir. Dr. Dubey.
Yeah. So in your presentation, you talked about Democrats shifting towards left and more so culturally shifting towards left. How would you define that?
Cultural left means basically policies which are pro LGBTQ, uh, pro the newer waves of feminism, because feminism has several waves. So, pro third wave, fourth wave feminism, uh, more in terms of anti colonialism, anti nationalism, means in terms of nationalism has become a bad word, uh, anti Zionism. So, these are some culturally some of the left wing positions in US. For example, I'll give you an example. In 2008, when Barack Obama was asked about gay marriage, he clearly said that marriage is between man and a woman. Okay, so there cannot be gay marriage cannot be justified in 2008. But he changed his position in his second term. So when he became pro gay marriage, so now uh, Democratic Party is completely pro gay marriage, and even the Republican Party has to accept that position because of individual liberty. So if two adults want to get married, so even the Republican Party now, in terms of, so even the Republican Party has to accept it. But till 2008, it was a consensus in the American political establishment that marriage is between a man and a woman. Similarly, this marijuana legalization, that is also a strong left-wing position. Many states have legalized marijuana. Earlier, it was no one could actually say such a thing. Any politician supporting legalization would not get any votes. There are many other such issues right now in schools, teaching children about transgenderism, encouraging them to become gender fluid. You decide, a small, say, 5-year-old boy will be told, you don't say you are a boy or a girl until you are 12. So then you decide whether you want to become a boy or a girl. And so the backlash from the conservatives, but among the Democrats, they are more open to these things. And so these are creating a lot of problems in the American society.
Thank you for the clarification, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And on a lighter note, what would you say that do you think that democracy is now again dead in America or something?
Yeah, so it is democracy which brings Trump, and American Constitution is so strong. The whole constitutional principles, and it's the first written constitution in the world, and it has been functioning for more than 2 centuries now. And so this is all really hyperbole to say that democracy can die in America. Not right now, at least.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope everybody here has clarified their doubts. If anybody has any more questions.
I have one last question before we conclude. Sir, why exactly if you see electoral maps of US, in especially swing states or other places also, like even in Republican states, we particularly see that large portions of votes are Democrat votes are concentrated in particularly urban cities. So why is it that Democrats, what kind of vote bank does Democrats have hold over, which is that urban people or people living in cities vote more Democrat, even in Republican states, but people in other parts of the country, they do not. What is the primary cause of this?
This is because large number of minorities are concentrated in these cities. Like the whole of middle America is voting Republican, but only the state of Illinois, which is Chicago, is the main city there. It votes Democrat because of the black minorities there. So many Latinos, blacks, they're concentrated in the cities. The other thing is the Democratic Party has a lot of support from the time of Bill Clinton, a lot of support of the IT sector, the support of the Hollywood, so entertainment industry. So large sections of these groups and people employed in those industries, they in general support Democratic Party, and this has happened in the 90s under Bill Clinton. It's a very strong vote bank of the Democratic Party. Besides, many college-educated young men and women, they are mostly left-leaning, and so they have a dislike for the Christian conservatives, who are the primary supporters of the Republican Party. And for this reason, so it's a coalition of minorities, certain economic sectors which support the Democratic Party, and college educated young men and women. Although in this particular election, there has been a shift there also. Many now educated young men and women are also voting for the Republican Party.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
With that, we conclude our question and answer round. And I would like to thank sir. Thank you, Dr. Sarmah, sir, for this insightful session. And with this, we would like to conclude the session. Thank you, everybody. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Praneeth.